my colleagues about predictability. We need to know exactly what it is that they want us to do so that we can make sure that we do it right. One of the things that I think brokers are good at is adaptability. And I don't think we're afraid of regulation. I think that we are good at solving regulatory issues. So tell us the regulations that you want us to adhere to and find, and we will find, we are the best ones to find a way to adhere to those regulations. We talk about consultative process. In the United States, we also have the privilege and the honor of being very involved with the Customs and Border Protection. They engage us in a lot of talks, a lot of deliberation when they're promulgating new rules that will affect imports into and out of the country. And we appreciate that, but I think that it came at a cost. I think that prior to this era of great communication, there was a lot of regulations that were done by the government with good intention, but without consulting the trade, without consulting the practitioners, without consulting you all out in the audience that know what it takes to clear a border. So they would put out a regulation that ultimately did the opposite. It created a roadblock. It created a problem for everybody, including them. So due to some of this pain that they suffered through, they have gone and now have been very consultative, I guess would be the right word, with industry. And not just the customs brokers. They talk to the brokers, they talk to the importers, exporters, the carriers, the players within the chain that know what it takes to get those goods through a border clearance, through an international border. So we are engaged very heavily with that. Some of the other things that we talk about in the United States and in the customs regulations is the permitting process. So in the United States, we have regions within the United States, and we have ports within the United States. And the regulations in today's environment state that a broker that works in a region or in a port, if they have offices in 5 or 6 or 7 or 20 ports in the United States, they have to have a licensed U.S. Customs broker, and they have to have a permit to work in those ports. So there's a lot of discussion right now about a national permit, having one permit that would allow a broker to office and do business in any port in the United States. Now there's some pros and cons to every subject, and I'm sure this one has a lot of that as well. One of the arguments that people will say that want to continue to maintain the position that we have today, which is a licensed broker in every port, is this is a good way for the Customs Service to know who they're working with. This is a good way to make sure that there's proper supervision of the actions of this firm in a different port. If you're on the other side of the aisle and you want this national permit, you're saying to the government, well, there's plenty of regulations that require me to have good supervision anyways without having to do a permit in every port. And if I can reduce the cost of permitting in every port and do it in one central location, that becomes more cost effective. And that cost effect I can pass on to my clients. So, you know, I'm not sure what the best way is. I know there's strong opinions on both sides, but the permitting scheme in the United States is definitely being discussed, and we're looking at it with interest to see exactly how it comes out. Record keeping. Record keeping needs to keep up with the electronic age. Not until about 4 or 5 months ago was there a requirement, I should say until 4 or 5 months ago there was a requirement to have paper documents. It's outdated. It should go to an electronic document. As long as we have the ability to reproduce that document and present it to the Customs Service, there should be no reason why we can't hold our documents electronically. So that's being addressed as well. And should there be the ability for a customs broker to have one central repository for those records? Should we be able to have one especially for the large brokerage firms, should they be able to have all those files in one repository instead of having them spread out all over the country? Difficult question, something that we all struggle with at times, but I think we need to adhere to technology, and technology has changed the way we do business. And in today's environment with budgets the way they are and everybody struggling to make sure that their margins are kept in place, these are subjects that will be, if anything, discussed with great passion. And they should be, you know, and hopefully the right minds will prevail and things will be done. What I found in many cases is the concerns of this medium and small brokers in a lot of these discussions is that we're giving advantages to the larger firms. I would tend to tell you that it's actually the opposite. I would tell you that having a national permit as a broker in Laredo, Texas, and being able to provide services at any port in the United States would make me more competitive. I may be wrong, but that's the opinion that I would take. Carol mentioned the creation of centers of excellence and expertise in the United States, and Customs and Border Protection, again, because of its budget constraints, is trying to find a better way to utilize and maximize their staff. And one of the things that we have as a problem today is their expertise is spread out all over the United States. And we never have the ability to have all of the minds on certain commodities such as textile or metals or pharmaceuticals in one shop where they can share their knowledge and make sure that the decisions that they're making are proper decisions. Again, great idea, but, and there's always that question, what role does a customs broker have in the centers of excellence and expertise? How do we interact with the centers of excellence and expertise? Because when you hear Customs and Border Protection talk about the centers of excellence and expertise, they talk about the benefits for the importing and exporting community. But they have to realize that a large portion of the people that they service are small and medium-sized companies. And those are the people that we represent. Those are the people that we represent because the cost of them going to a service center of excellence is not the same for them than it is for a IBM of the world or a Apple Corporation or a Samsung. It's just not. They don't have those compliance departments that other larger firms have. That's the role that the broker fills in. So we want to make sure that we are involved in that process, and there is in the makeup of the centers of excellence and expertise that there is a model for the customs broker to fit in and make sure we continue to represent the people that we do business for. The one other thing I want to touch on, and I really, you know, you can have a whole presentation on things that are happening in the customs business, probably in any country, because one of the fascinating things about this industry, and I've been in the industry for over 30 years. My family's been in the industry for over 100 years. My grandfather was a customs broker in Mexico. It's constantly changing. We are constantly being challenged to adapt. But that's the exciting part of our business. That's what gets me up in the morning. That's what gets me to the office in the morning, because I need to keep up and make sure I can adapt to the needs of my clients. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them at the end of the session. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kiko. Our last speaker, but not the least, is Janice. Janice is a valuable member of our secretariat, and she has participated together with Carol in doing capacity building work through the Canadian Society of Customs Brokers. Janice?
Is this
The lower one. No.
but I don't have a presentation.
That one.
Yes. Is this?
That's it. once again, a little difficulty. So let me get to the right spot. Thanks for your patience. Anyone who has ever spent time at an IFCBA meeting or event knows that we are just like a family. And Shantanu has become a very important member of our family since he first joined our organization. And I just would like to extend an invitation to all of you to join us next year at our biannual World Conference, which will be held in Seoul, Korea, in May of 2014. And you'll be able to experience perhaps a little bit of our hospitality as we've been able to enjoy yours here in Delhi. I think we've already heard from other speakers that no matter where customs brokers operate in the world, we have many things in common. And most definitely, one of those commonalities is our shared belief in the value of the customs broker to the supply chain. Great news is that we aren't the only people who hold that view. The World Bank has become a strong advocate of customs brokers, and they now recognize that the customs broker is the key to trade efficiency, particularly in developing economies. And to be perfectly frank, it's as a direct result of that recognition that the IFCBA has become involved in capacity building work relating to customs broker regulation and management in two different countries at this point. Most recently, we've been contracted by the World Bank to develop a customs broker management mechanism in Laos. To date, there have been businesses and individuals operating as, they refer to them as shipping agents, but these are individuals or businesses that file customs entries, mostly in paper to date, but they are introducing the ASICUDA system. So they asked us to come in and help them identify whether or not indeed there was a need for licensed customs brokers, or perhaps to confirm their belief that there was that need. So we had 2 missions in the country where we met with both the private sector and with customs. And as a matter of fact, as a result of our missions, we planned and orchestrated and actually held the very first meeting ever where customs and business sat together in the same room to discuss possible improvements to the system. So that was very exciting for us. We also have been working with the World Customs Organization on a project that is funded by the Norwegian government. And this project is taking place in Vietnam, and it's further development of a customs broker licensing mechanism in that country. They have done some preliminary work, but there really hasn't been the development that they wanted to see in terms of private sector setting up business as customs brokers. What is interesting is, even though they're in the very early stages of developing customs brokers, they're very, very keen to establish a national association. So we see that perhaps as a chance for us to continue to grow our own IFCBA family. The capacity building work in these countries takes a fair bit of effort, and not only do we conduct interviews with business and customs in these countries, we also do a fair bit of research, and that's where our own best practices model comes into play. We've been able to use those recommendations as a starting point for our research and for the many reports that we have to present to both the Lao and Vietnamese government. There's also great potential for ongoing partnership in the areas of education and professional development, and we know that the FFFAI is also very interested in those sorts of initiatives. We're really starting with a clean slate in these countries for the most part. But what we've identified from our capacity building work in these 2 countries is that there are already some common elements have emerged. One is the need of a a means of educating a pool of individuals who have the necessary education and expertise related to customs compliance, to trade facilitation. And as has already been mentioned, we are absolutely certain that there's also a need for ongoing professional development of those individuals. Secondly, there has to be in place an administrative structure within the customs departments, and there needs to be appropriate policies and procedures for supporting customs broker management. These countries obviously already have fairly well-structured customs departments, but the practice of occupational regulation is new to them. So once they put the structure in place, they also have to set up their own means for training their customs officials as to proper practices for occupational regulation, which is something that's far, far removed from their practice of border management itself or operations. I'd already mentioned that both in Laos and Vietnam, they're very interested in putting an association in place. And that's because they recognize the important role that associations can play in helping business meet its obligations to government, and also in helping customs brokers meet their obligations to importers and exporters. And I think over time, they would like to see their own associations develop much as yours has here and ours have in Canada, Mexico, and the US, to provide ongoing education, professional development, and other services to their customs broker members. We also are strong advocates of an ongoing strategy for customs business consultation and information sharing. We all know that it's essential for a customs broker to have accurate, up-to-date information delivered to them in a timely way. In many of our countries, we see use of websites, regular email services. Even in some countries, they use texting to deliver quick, up-to-date information on happenings at various border points to customs brokers. In terms of customs business consultation, I think we all agree that we'd like to see more of that up front before laws are changed, before regulations are put in place. And it's the same in the countries of Laos and Vietnam and those countries that are new to customs broker regulation. They too recognize the benefit of having a structured consultative process. And I guess a communication strategy in terms of the transition is very important, because for many of these countries that we're looking at for capacity building work, those who are involved in the importation, exportation of goods are small businesses. They're engaged in, they're very, very busy. A change of this significance really requires a well thought out communication strategy, and they need to be engaged so they understand the value that a customs broker will bring to the process. And finally, because we realize that even with all of our experience, we're not going to be designing the perfect regulatory mechanism, we always propose that there be a formalized evaluation and review plan so that there can be an opportunity to make the adjustments necessary to the regulatory program. Because I'm the last speaker and because I know time is short, I'm going to quickly wrap things up, but I know you all agree that the licensed customs broker is critical to facilitated trade environment. And we, of course, would like to see licensed, educated, regulated customs brokers in as many countries around the world as possible, because we know that the educated, regulated customs broker is an asset not only to the Customs Administration, but also to the business community, the people who buy your services. And so we know by growing our family of customs brokers, we enhance each country's economic prosperity. So thanks very much, and I think now probably we'll take some questions.
Any questions? Yeah, here on the right-hand side.
I'm K. Sriram here. 2014 down the line, NAFTA, treaty getting signed, or it's going to take some more time? NAFTA, NAFTA treaty between US, Canada and Mexico.
Yeah. I mean, excuse me, what is the question? I mean,
See, few years back,
yeah.
there was a proposed legislation in the year 2014. The three countries are going to sign a treaty, USA, Mexico and Canada, for free movement of goods among the three countries. But that treaty is under discussion, or it is going to get implemented shortly?
Well, if you allow me, I'll answer this. Listen, originally, you see, early in the almost 20 years ago, a little bit more, Canada and the U.S. signed, you see, a free trade agreement originally. A few years later, I think 2 years later, Mexico also subscribed it, so it turned into a North America free trade agreement. That has been enforced for the past, since 1994, so it's going to be 19 years and it's in effect. And actually, you see some of the last provisions that were agreed upon at that time are just being implemented as of now. But I think it's already in operation. It's not a it's not an economic union. It's just a free trade agreement. That means that the rate of duty will eventually go down to zero. And I think in most cases they are already zero. But there is always customs declarations. There is always transit from one country to the other. So there won't be a free movement of goods. Another question? Here on the left.
Hi, my name is Nilesh Gandhi. Your AEO system, which is implemented most part of the world, is it plugged on to the custom systems, which means that when customs are scrutinizing the documents, or the custom system is checking on the documents, does it know that which of the partner, whether he's a transporter or a forwarder or a warehouse keeper or a customs broker, which of them were AEO compliant for a transaction and which of them were not in a single transaction?
In the United States, on the actual documentation that we send in electronically, the participating parties will have a flag on AEO status or not. So they will be able to, if I represent 10 companies and 2 of them are AEO and the other 8 are not, Customs and Border Protection will actually know the 8 that are not and be able to identify the 2 that are. They will also be able to identify within their system whether me as a broker is an AEO status. Now, if I'm a broker and I'm AEO, that doesn't mean that that AEO designation transfers to my clients. That just lets them know that I have qualified, but there's other players in the party. So the more players within the chain that the Customs Service has under AEO, the less possibility of examination. They should get a better clearance rate.
Okay. Any other question? Here on the left.
I got 2 questions actually. One on the process mapping you mentioned. When you're doing the process mapping in each country, do you also take into account the interface requirements within the country and interface requirements with other countries? That's number 1 question. Second question is, do you have standard prescribed formats or processes which can take care of the country's needs, each country's needs, in terms of security, terrorism, arms and ammunition, drugs? Have you evolved on that? I think the first speaker spoke on this.
With respect to the standards question, that's a very active role that the WCO plays. So when you have the SAFE framework of standards itself, it establishes certain criteria and standards. There's the WCO data model that countries should adhere to when they're communicating or implementing requirements for advance information. And that again, should create greater harmonization and consistency from country to country. So I know that our own country uses the data model, and nothing happens in terms of data changes or requirements for information that is not consistent with the WCO data model. With respect to the process mapping, I'm not sure that I understood your question in terms of interface requirements.
When you're talking about the process within a country, there'll be regulatory regimes, fundamental reasons, and basically physical hurdles, barriers. But you're talking about imports and exports. You should also be able to take care of the processes which the other compliances are required. The compliances required by other countries. So when you're taking into account the process mapping for a particular country, do you also look at the interface with external agencies, stakeholders?
Yes, that's certainly the intent, absolutely the intent. You know, one of the dilemmas that the private sector consultative group has, because our members do business in so many different countries, is how we identify. It's one thing, as we've done in our recent annex, to identify the good practice, but we're very sensitive about the fact that there are just as many bad practices out there. And so again, we're a bit sensitive about how we identify those bad practices and make recommendations for improvement. But it's definitely the process mapping across borders from country to country in terms of companies' business models.
Yeah,
So-
I'd be a bit interested in knowing on the continual development program for the custom brokers that you spoke about, that Canada has one and America is trying to copy that. Can you just tell me very precisely, how do you monitor that in terms of, is it done in number of hours, or is it done with, how does the whole system work?
Kiko?
In the United States, it's based on the number of hours that you are in training. And for our program, the certification programs that we have in our National Brokers Association, the requirement is 20 credit units, which is 20 hours of education per year. We maintain a transcript at the association for all the individuals that are in the program. So at any one moment, if it would become mandatory, which it will be soon, we can transfer those transcripts to the Customs Service for validation.
We're approaching the end of our session, so I'm going to allow one more last question. Oh, well, two more questions, and then we'll just move on to the close.
Yeah, I'm Ruben. I would like to ask Mr. Kiko that the recent announcement of starting this implementation of ISF more seriously, and those who make mistakes or file it later are going to be penalized heavily. I mean, to begin with, it's going to be $5,000. Well, if there is any repeated mistake, they have not said anything or specified any amount. So can you throw some light on this? It's very scary for all of us because this IFS is being prepared by our staff in the office, and well, there's likely human error, maybe typographical or otherwise. Now, how it's going to be dealt with? Is going to be considered if it is explained, or is a flat $5,000, there you are? Thank you.
The ISF implementation of penalties has actually been delayed for almost a year, if not a little longer, so that people can get accustomed to what it is to transfer this information. I think the Customs Service has done a very good job of allowing time for people to understand the system. But when you talk about security of a nation, you need to put some teeth behind the process. And I think people now are going to have that come up. But the penalties will go to the importer of record. Now, the importer of record will probably go back to the provider of service. But and when you talk about a $5,000 penalty, if you're a repeat offender, it's not going to stop at $5,000. So it's actually more severe than what you're saying. This is the reason why a global network of brokers, and why it's important that we have a high level of professionalism in our industry, because a lot of times the people that are transmitting the ISF information are not US-bound people. But the importer, who is the importer of record in front of the Customs Service, will actually be the ultimate receiver of these penalties.
Shall we move on to the last question, please?
See, we take care of importers' needs in Bangalore in IT segment. This question is to Mr. Kiko. What happens typically is in an invoice when it is shipped out of US for in-warranty replacements or dead-on arrival in replacements, no value for customs is being declared, at a zero value is declared. But of course, the export out of customs may be zero duties in US, but in India, the duties are being levied on the value of the item. When no value is declared in the invoice, it becomes difficult for us to complete the assessment process here. So a message needs to be communicated across within US, especially in the California segment, wherein the invoice value needs to be declared for any replacements. It doesn't should contain any zero value like that.